Welcome back to the Human or Athlete podcast. After a few months break where I had to sort out my own football career, I'm back with a brand new episode featuring none other than Sam Courty. Sam is a GB rower who only started rowing in her first year at university. We delve deep into topics such as difficult injuries, where she talks about her spinal injury that took her out of the Olympics in Tokyo, to how she created a WhatsApp group chat for all of the GB rowers to bring them all together, as a lot of you athletes may know, in some of our darkest and loneliest times. We look at how athletes deal with pressure and as to how she looks to find as much joy and happiness in how she trains and to make sure she sees so many friends outside of rowing as well. She wisely reminds us that if we see ourselves as athletes and treat ourselves with constant analysis, criticism, and high expectations of performance for every minute of the day, then other people are going to treat us like that robot back. This is Ripping Up the Athlete Rulebook with Sam Courty. All right. Hi, Sam. Thanks for coming on. It's great to have you on the Human Athlete podcast.
Thank you very much for asking me.
We'll jump right in, as I always say, and kind of if you could give us a kind of brief little insight into kind of your journey and where you are now in rowing and kind of how it came about. I think it's really interesting.
Okay, so I'm originally from a little village, hamlet, you could probably call it, in Northumberland, so really North England. And I got a brother and a sister, two parents, always been a very sporty family. Always watched any kind of sport on TV. Like that's just what we did. We weren't really like a soap sort of family. We were like sport. Always been very competitive between all three of us. We always tended to try and do different things because it was a lot easier and kept the peace if we weren't trying to beat each other at everything. So originally my main sport was horse riding. And I did that from I think about the age of 6 up until I left to go to university, so 18. And I did like a big variety within that, but the main one I focused on at the end was the eventing. And didn't actually want to go to uni. Wanted to be a full-time event rider, and my parents were like, perfect, like if that's what you want to do, you can go and do that, but we will support you for a year and then you're on your own. And I was like, oh my God, like I do not have the money to like, that's the big like problem with the horse riding is it's so expensive. And they'd supported me for all those years, and will forever be eternally grateful. But it was like I was 18 years old and they couldn't support me forever. And I was just like, I financially can't support myself. Even if I did this for a year, there was no way I'd be able to make it work. So I was like, okay, I'll go to university. And then I went to university down in Bath. And just before I left, this is where the weird stuff starts happening. My mum had a dream that I broke a rowing world record. And I've like never rowed. I've never been in a boat, never had any interest at all in the sport. And she was like, can you just give it a go? Like, if you go down there, like you're obviously not going to be riding down there. Like, can you just give it a go and see what you do? And I was like, right, okay. Like wandered around like the freshers fair and sport fair and picked up a leaflet for rowing, but wasn't really that interested in it. And actually went for the trials for netball instead. Didn't get onto the netball team. And then in my halls of residence, one of my housemates was like, oh, will someone please come to the rowing, like, welcome social with me? And I was like, yeah, okay. Like, my mum wants me to give it a go, so I'll come along. And that was it. I'm still rowing now. Yeah, I was sat in the meeting and they were like all talking. And basically, I've always just wanted to go to the Olympics. Like, I just want to be an Olympian, want to go to the Olympics. And as I was sat in this like lecture theatre, as people talking, like one guy stood up and he was like, oh, I've Didn't start rowing till I came to uni, but I'm currently trialing for the GB under 23 team. And it was like a real light bulb moment that I was like, oh, maybe I'm not too old. Like, maybe actually there's still hope that you don't have to have done this sport since you were like 3 years old. Because that had become a worry by that point, that I was like, I'm actually, like, you hear of all these like kids that have been doing it for years and years and years. And I genuinely thought there's like, I'm not actually going to make it. And he was like, oh, but I'm doing this. And I was like, right, let's just give this a go and see what happens. And yeah, like, I'm not going to say my first year of rowing was that serious, because I definitely still lived the life as a fresher, and still had a good time, which I like do not regret at all. Like, I think it's so important to keep the balance between life and sport. And I'm so glad for that year that I didn't really take rowing that seriously. I got the full uni experience. And then when it did come around to it, it wasn't quite like, the pull for the social life wasn't quite as big, because I'd actually already done it for a year. So when someone sat me down and was like, if you actually do want to do this, you're going to have to start probably going out a little less and doing a bit more training. And it was easy to do that, because I was like, okay, like, I've had my fun for a year, like, let's crack on with the rowing. And yeah, basically I was like, it feels like a whirlwind. Like, it's been a really, I mean, that was now 10 years ago, but it's been like such a steep learning curve and such a, like, it was definitely, I feel like I got thrown in at the deep end, and it was like, you will sink or swim. And yeah, so I think it was like 2 years after I started, I was representing Great Britain, like, seniors for the first time.
Wow.
And that was like a real, I got selected to go out to race in Seattle. And that was just like, so I was so out of my depth. And we were like, it was like this big event that they had on, and we were like helping like local schools, and I think they brought some local school kids along to like have a go at rowing, and we like put them in the boat at the side of the landing stage and like pushed them off a little bit. And one of the guys on the men's team turned around and joked and was like, this was you 2 years ago, Sam. And I was like, it actually was. Yeah, so it was mad. And I didn't really let on to anyone, actually. I think it was like my 4th race or something in an 8 side by side. Like, I was so out of my depth, it was ridiculous. But I just kind of just didn't really let on to anyone, and just, I was at the back of the boat, so no one could really see what I was doing. And then so did a couple of under 23s, and then in 2016 did the university world championships, and then from there got invited into the team full time after Rio.
Amazing.
And so I've done world championships, I've done a couple of world championships, Olympic qualifiers, was selected in 2020 and then COVID hit. And then I picked up a back injury which required surgery in June, so missed out on Tokyo. And yeah, currently rehabbing that with the aim to get back rowing and Paris, because it's only 3 years away.
3 years,
Yeah.
Amazing. What a story. If we go back to that kind of time when you said you started rowing, you had that year where you were kind of half-hearted into it, and you said that person sat you down. Who was that?
So I tested, so the GB Rowing have like a talent ID scheme, and I tested for that at the end of my first year, but I wasn't tall enough. So I was quite, I think I was about 5 or 6 centimeters too short. Like, I was a long way off of what they wanted, but I'd like passed the physiology test, passed the strength tests. It was just the height that was letting me down. So they like offered me, they were like, sorry, we can't let you onto the program, but we'd like you to train alongside. And I was a bit like, oh, like, no, because then you're kind of just using me. So I'm really stubborn as a person. So I was like, no, I will do this on my own then. So went to the uni coach and was like, this is what they've said, but I don't want to just be like training alongside and their athletes benefiting from me training, but me not getting the coaching and everything that they're getting.
Like supporting their dreams and not yours.
Yeah. So I kind of was like, nah, it's not for me. And then I was lucky enough in 2012. So that was like June time of probably a bit. So probably that was like May time of 2012. And then I was lucky enough to go to London and watch the rowing at Dorney for the Olympics. And we watched Helen and Heather win their first gold medal. And I was on the train on the way home and they had the newspaper was in front of me. It was like that evening's newspaper and the front cover had a photo of them. And I was just like reading through the article and like it was more Heather than Helen and like reading the comparisons between the two of us. And they both trained at Bath. Heather was a student at Bath. She didn't start rowing until she went to uni. And I was like reading this and I was like, oh, like this sounds quite familiar. And I think it was like then I like messaged the uni coach and I was like, right, okay, you said that if I'm going to do this, I need to do this properly. Like I'm in, like, amazing. I think I can do this. And then the two of us, I missed way too many lectures than I'll let my mum ever know. But I basically would like train with the uni in the mornings and then would stay down and do like an extra session in the single with the coach just to get some more like one-on-one time. Like he was great. He definitely put in more than he definitely got paid to do. It was just as soon as I'm like given something or told that I can't do something or there's like a challenge, that's it. Like I'm achieving it no matter what it takes, even if it does mean I sacrifice my degree.
It's really interesting how there's that kind of belief in place. Like you mentioned it before slightly in that you have to be playing since you were like 3, 4, 5 years old and, you know, all of that. And I probably think that I identify with that as well. Like that's kind of all what I've always known is that, you know, I can't start a new sport now or whatever. Like there's no flexibility on that. And there's obviously 2 or 3 situations or examples you've just said that people have started at 18. Is that like kind of a thing in rowing that you can, because it's maybe, I don't know if I don't know enough about rowing, but in terms of kind of like, if you've got, like you said, the strength and the physiology, can you adapt into it quite easily? Or how does that work?
Yeah, I'd say it's a very much an endurance based sport. So people's careers are actually really quite long in rowing. And I mean, without injury and illness and stuff, like we have Fran Houghton did 5 Olympic Games and Catherine Granger did, like, there are actually a lot of rowers that have competed at multiple games. And with endurance, you do just keep getting better. I think those that have started really young, it's more they burn out by the time that they get to maybe university or under 23 level. And because it's not easy what we do, and it's hard from quite a young age as well. Like they expect, like the juniors do quite a lot of training for juniors, and definitely if they've done that since the age of 14, 15 from school, then by the time you get to like 22, 23, that's a lot of training. You've sacrificed a lot of your life to do that training. And with rowing, it does require a lot of sacrifices and a lot of your time. And I think those that, like, we have Helen Glover, Pete Reed, they never did under 23s. They joined later. So they weren't even on the scene. Like, I don't think Helen started until she was like 24. I don't think she got noticed.
Crazy.
So it's definitely, if you've done something in the past that's been endurance based and you have that endurance, then really it's a skill that you have to learn at the end of the day. And I mean, rowers will make it sound really complicated, but it's really, you just have to put your oar in the water, push really hard and take it back out. And it's not really that any harder than that. Like, we literally do one movement over and over again. And I think more than anything, it's, if you've got the mental side to it and you've got the drive and the motivation and all of that, and you're prepared to put yourself in a lot of pain for a reasonably long amount of time, then I think, yeah, you will do all right. And yeah, I've seen like a lot of good under 23 rowers, a lot of good junior rowers not make it any further because they have just burnt out, and it's not been for them. Which almost, is nice. It's almost nice as coming in later that actually, like, you don't have to have done it for years.
It almost sounds like a mental endurance kind of thing, is that if you're doing it for 10 years already in the juniors, and it's like you said, that one repetitive situation over and over, is to doing that for 10 years in juniors, and maybe obviously not even getting into that senior situation. That's like, it's obviously difficult to do that for 10 years and then be kind of like, what have I done with this 10 years? Whilst if you're starting it in that later and you've got, obviously, like you said, a bit more fresh face in it, there's a bit more mental energy there that sustains you. And then you're obviously pushing on to try and win world championships and win medals.
Yeah, it's like, I'm really not selling the sport here at all, but it is it is extremely boring. Like, we spend we can spend up to 2 hours on a rowing machine, like with nothing. Like, there's no movies on, there's no iPads, there's like, yes, we have music, but like that's it. And then you go out on the lake, and yes, we row in some fantastic places with some unbelievable scenery, but it's still hard work. And the view may look really good for the first few days, and then actually you're still looking at the same person's back of the head. And so it is. And like, so many people ask me, they're like, well, how, like, what do you think of, like, how do you do this? And it's like, I honestly don't know. I think I must just zone out and just like sit with almost just like white noise, and you get used to it. And yeah, and I can see why, like, I can't, like, I think it's unbelievable that people can do it for so long. And since even, I think it's more at that age, like at the age where you're young and your attention span is really short and you do just want to do things that's exciting. Like, I don't know how some of those like 15, 16-year-olds are sitting on a rowing machine, because like, it's like, yeah, it's not for the faint-hearted to do it for that length of time.
How, when it's obviously kind of that thing, it almost mirrors that, or it is that time with yourself in that moment, that relationship with yourself. How has that kind of developed since you've been sat in that rowing seat?
I think going back to the horse, I definitely had a different relationship with sport when I used to do the horses compared to the rowing. And with the horses, like I said earlier, my parents supported me and put in a lot of time, a lot of money, and I always felt like I needed to pay them back for that. And for me, the only way of really doing that was through results and performing well. And I think by the end of those 8 years, 10 years that I did it for, I'd kind of lost the enjoyment of it, because all I thought about was the results. And that was, otherwise, if I didn't perform, then I'd kind of let them down, because there was such a team effort behind the performance that I couldn't have done it without them. And it was like my last, and I used to stress, and I used to get so nervous and almost didn't enjoy the last couple of years, because I was literally just doing it performance. And obviously with horses, you could be practicing the day before, everything could go foot perfect. You turn up to the event and someone decides to put an umbrella up, and that's like your competition over because the horse has decided to freak out at an umbrella. And a lot of things are out of your control. And then that would be it. And then I'd be devastated and gutted that I hadn't been able to perform or pay them back. And I did my last competition with the horses in Freshers Week of uni. So I did Freshers Week, and then I left to go and do this last competition. And it didn't go to, it was like a reasonably big competition as well. I think it was like the junior regionals or something. And it was like representing Northern England. And it was like the last one. And I had to pull up on the cross country because he'd hit a fence and he didn't feel quite right, the horse. Mm-hmm. And I was like gutted. I was like, this was it over. But I was more worried about what other people were thinking. And actually, like, I was upset with the result, but could understand that why I had to do it and why I had to stop, but was more concerned about what other people would think of it. And then I went back to uni and literally nobody cared. And it was like the biggest learning curve and like the biggest breath of fresh air, that everyone was just like, oh, how was it? Okay, cool, move on. Like, it did not change a thing about anything to do with uni. And I was like, right, like, I'm not letting another sport do this to me. Like, I'm going to go into the rowing and it's going to be for me and for me only. Like, I'm not going to ever feel like I've let anyone else down, because I'm the one who's putting in all this time and effort. I'm the one that's getting up in the mornings to go to training. Like, it's not anyone else's. And I can deal with letting myself down. Like, I can deal with something not going right. And actually, I haven't let anyone else. Like, the only time I could possibly feel like if I'd let someone else down was maybe if we were in a race, and I don't even think then, like, I truly believe that whoever I'm with will get on that start line and give 110%. And if I know that I'm giving 110%, like, no one intentionally goes out to do anything wrong in a race, like, no one. And like, you don't intentionally try to like mess something up. You don't intentionally don't try your hardest. Like, that's just not in people at this level. So I'd never feel like anyone could let me down in that situation. So I don't feel like I could ever let anyone else down. And it's like massively changed how I am with the rowing. And like, if things don't go to plan and I don't get the result that I wanted, okay, well, the world still goes round and things will still happen, and your friends are still your friends, your family is still your family. Like, it actually, and it's made things so much easier with rowing. And I like see other people around me and other people I train with who I can see me when I used to ride in them now. And it's like, you can't tell someone to change, because like, you only really experience, like, you can only really learn yourself. Like, it's so many people, like, you can read as many books as you want, you can hear as many people tell you, oh, it doesn't matter, like, I'll still love you if it all goes, like, people can tell you that, but it's not until you actually experience it yourself that you then suddenly start to understand it and believe it. And as much as I didn't enjoy the riding at the end, I wouldn't have changed anything, because it's helped me so much with my rowing now. And like, yeah, like, my relationship with the sport and as an athlete in the sport is completely different. And I think because of what I experienced back with the horses.
It's so interesting, that pressure aspect to sport and where it comes from in all these different aspects, because it's, you know, people compete at sport at these high levels for loads of different reasons. You know, you have some people who are incredibly in that zone and they're enjoying it, and then you have these people who are doing it out of, you know, I always go back to like Michael Jordan and stuff like that. He's channeling like this insecurity and pain that he's thriving off, and it's not mostly healthy and sustainable. It's a real pain. So it's very interesting as to where that comes from, and that all these pressure. Then you got the family thing, because it's that achievement oriented sporty family that that
Yeah.
all want you to do well, but their anxiety kind of translates into upping your own, and you're obviously, as athletes, we put enough pressure on ourselves, and to
Yeah.
try and perform at this incredibly high level and having your pressure on the weight of your shoulders, plus you thinking, your family is, and then your friends or your coaches or your teammates, it becomes then impossible. It's becomes so like kind of suffocating to and heavy to perform that you're never even gonna push those PBs or push, getting the best out of yourself because you don't even come close. That, I guess, embracing that and stuff like that, accepting it, it's really difficult because, like you said, it's impossible to say, oh, there's no cure or solution or anything that says, oh, snap out of it. Like, it's not like that. So if there was, if kind of breaking that down and that acceptance of the pressure and stuff like that, what has changed in kind of how you see yourself, how you talk to yourself? Is there anything in that relationship that you can see that difference, kind of like in a really detailed thought pattern or anything, if you kind of get what I'm getting at?
Um, I think the big one for me this year is probably if I'd a few years ago, if I'd not made it to the Olympics and then in the way I did, and then had to watch the Olympics at home, and so many people have asked me and checked up that I was okay and wanted to make sure that watching it was all right. And actually, I did not have a problem, an issue at all watching the games back
Mm-hmm.
and like watching them and sitting there. And I was still getting up at ridiculous times in the night to watch it because the rowing on was at such stupid hours. But and like the whole thing of like when everyone was getting their kit and getting excited about it. And I think a few years ago that I would have found it really hard and found it difficult to watch that because I would have been jealous and I'd have wanted to be them and wouldn't have wanted to. But it was like I couldn't go. I had a back injury and it wasn't my time to be there. And I really wanted to make sure that when the others were like going through their kit and a few of them were like saw that I was there and wanted to like tone it down and not be all up in like in my face and everything. And I was like, no, please be excited about this. Please be as happy and as everything as you want to be, because I would want to be that in your position. Like I don't want you to open your bag of Olympic kit and look disappointed or not be happy about it, because hopefully when I get to experience that, I want it to feel exactly how I imagine it to feel. And it was like just watching the games and watching it back in the racing, it was like I was actually just watching my friends at the Olympics, and that was really cool.
Yeah.
And like knowing the backstories and knowing how hard they've trained the last few, like especially the last year in COVID and everything that's gone on, actually, like I think being on that start line at the games was a huge achievement. And a lot of people probably won't realize exactly the ins and outs and everything. And to be honest, I don't think many of them actually appreciate how big of achievement it is to be on the start line. But it's a lot easier for me looking from the outside and actually seeing that, yeah, it was huge and I really enjoyed it. And I think one of the big learning points from it was I know a lot of them were very stressed and felt the pressure of the expectation from back home. But actually from being someone back home, there wasn't really that expectation. And like for a lot of them, they probably were really stressed and hated that whole thing, and it's felt like they'd let people down. And I can like never, this is like another example where I'm like, with the horses, it's taught me a lot, because like you watch the interviews on TV and when someone doesn't do particularly well, and for example, for a reason, my example is like one, I think it's from the athletics, and someone I can't remember. I think it might have been Dina Asher Smith, and she was doing her interview, and she's like, I feel like I've let everyone down. And like sat there watching this interview, and I'm like, but I don't feel let down by you at all. Like, apps, like whatever you do is completely like, I have absolutely no expectation. Like my life isn't going to change depending on what how you've done and how you've competed. And I think that was like realizing that, and I've actually noted it in my phone. So if I ever am in that position, I can go back and be like, actually, people don't feel like that.
Yeah.
Like people at home aren't gutted and aren't disappointed or let down by the result. They're actually just, their only emotion is how they just want you to be happy, and they just don't want you to be upset, and they don't want you to be disappointed. Like they don't care. Like for them, the sun's still going to come up the next morning, and there's going to be more races on the next day. And if you ask someone about their favorite part of the Olympics, like they can maybe name 2 bits, and they've forgotten other massive key things that happened at the Olympics. They're not going to remember one semi-final. Like that's just not, but for us, it's everything. And we put so much time and give up so much for it that it is our whole world, but it's not to everyone else. And I think that's the bit, is like knowing that, and that's fine for us to do that, but it's not going to impact any relationship between anyone else, and everything else just keeps happening and the world keeps spinning.
It's interesting because, for example, so like I know one of my coping mechanisms is to like split things into black and white. So I'm very much like, I'm training as hardcore as everything as I can, or I'm completely rested. So how do you go from embracing that perspective you just shared, where there's obviously there's the compassion and there's the bigger view of the world still spinning,
yeah,
but also that this is how much it means to me? And how do you find like that middle ground, that kind of gray between the black and white? Because it's like, you don't want to play it down because you want to get the best out of yourself, but you don't want to play it up because then it becomes too constricting and too heavy with that pressure. So like, I can feel my mind going, how do I apply this in this this way to find that balance or that gap?
I think it all depends where the pressure comes from and what you're trying to. So for me, for a lot of years, the pressure was comparing myself to other people and how I compare to, whether even if it was just in pieces in training and where I am on the score sheet at the end, and all of that was like, that was how I justified whether I'd been successful that week or not successful, and that was where the pressure was from. But then I think as soon as you take comparison out of it with other people, and I think this is in life as well, I think comparison is toxic. And as soon as I took that away from it, and I was like, right, no, I'm just going to get better. And it was something me and my pairs partner did last year, where it was like, well, right, we're going to stop just looking at this result sheet and stop seeing where we are. Let's just go out there. We'll give ourselves targets. We'll give ourselves goals that we're going to do for each session. And wherever, if we tick those markers, then okay, that session's been good. And if we go faster than we did the week before, then that's a success. And we went the fastest we'd ever gone because we just forgot about it. Like, it didn't matter. It didn't matter what anyone else was doing. It didn't impact us. And we just kept on our own thing. So then when you take that home, there was then not the pressure of everything that I did outside of that was all to make me go faster. And you have to leave rowing at rowing, but then you have to make life decisions that still
impact it,
are still affected by the rowing. But if it was like, if it was like I was going to meet up with friends beforehand, I'd be like, no, don't want to do that because that's not high performance. That's not in the rule book. But actually, if I'm going to feel better because I'm going to go and see some friends, and actually for my mental health, I'm going to be able to switch off and I'm going to see people and that'll be better, then I'm going to do that. And as soon as I started it's like being selfish, but in a positive way for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as you start using that mindset, and it does take a lot of confidence, because it is going against the norm.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I know a lot of people will be like, well, you don't go out, you don't see people, you don't go for a drink because you can't drink because alcohol's bad for your performance, or you can't spend all this time on your feet because this and that. It's like, well, yes, but actually there's a physical side to stuff, and there's also the mental side that you have to look after. And like, I just like going to see friends and sitting on the sofa and watching sport.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't have to go and do a load of stuff, but just something that I like to do. And if I've come back and I've had a weekend and I'm happy, and then I've turned back to training, and okay, the focus is still on me, but now it's, let's see how fast we can make this boat go. And this is what we're going to do this week. And the first day we're going to look at technical stuff, and speed isn't going to matter. Today is a technical focus. Okay, the next day we're going to think about this. Okay, now we've got pieces on the Wednesday, now it's a performance day. And we like just segmented our training ourselves. And our coach actually was really good at it as well. He was very much like, this is what today's going to be about, this is what next day is going to be about. Okay, now you can go and perform.
Mm-hmm.
And it just meant that any pressure that there might have been was only put on a small part of that week of training. And we were actually completely in control of it because we set the goals.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was just like, we had the most, and it just, our levels of fun increased so much as well in training. Like, we had the best time, and we really probably shouldn't have been, because like, I was hanging on with a back injury, and we were like on the edge of being selected and not being selected. And yet I absolutely loved going out and doing the training sessions and doing, because they were so much fun, and we'd like pushed ourselves and tested ourselves, but it was all for us. Like, no one else saw what we were doing apart from the two of us and the coach. And like, we made a list at the end of like the positives of what we'd achieved, and we achieved so much last year, but this time it came in training, and we had like PBs on the water and stuff that we'd never really acknowledged before. We'd like look at a season, you go, well, how did you compete at that race? How did you do at that race? Okay, that was it. But there was so much more we could gain from things that we'd like just ignored.
Yeah, 100%. And it's that achievement pressure and everything is very interesting, because I was listening to something the other day, and it was talking about how the dopamine works. And you obviously get one pathway of dopamine is from moving, and the other one is from that craving and motivation. But it was interesting that nothing actually gets triggered from the reward. All the dopamine comes in actually craving and being motivated towards getting there. And so obviously you've switched that and followed the the cliche thing of love the journey and not the trophy or whatnot. But it's so fascinating to see people do that and embody it completely. And like you said, obviously comparison is that killer of joy. Where do you think, if we could go kind of deeper and go into that depths of you as you grow up in sport, where did that comparison come from? And how have you seen yourself? Like, how do you see yourself differently as a person without that comparison? And where did it stem from? And I guess in that awareness and knowledge of that's there, that's here, but I'm not going to attach to it or identify with it.
I think it's all been quite recent. I think your podcast is called Human or Athlete, and I think a lot of the time as athletes we don't get annoyed, but we wonder why we're treated just like athletes and not humans first. And actually, I think for a large time, I actually only saw myself as an athlete and not as a human. And so how can I expect anyone else to treat me like a human if I'm just treating myself like an athlete? And I think in 2020, Christmas 2018, I got asked to leave the training centre, the high performance centre, and go train back at my club because they said that my performances weren't up to scratch, and they were like, you need to like basically just leave. And it was like, I guess it was like, that was like the moment of, okay, what do you do now? Do you go and reinvent the wheel and try and do something else, or do you stick to what you know? And I honestly, hand on heart, believe that they just made the wrong decision. And I didn't feel like it was my, like, I didn't feel like I wasn't good enough to be there. It was like, they've just not done, like, they've got this wrong. Like, they've just made the wrong decision. So I went back to the club and I was like, well, I don't need to do anything different. I was like, I'll get some consistent training in. And the coach was like, well, let's do that, but let's have some fun. Like, let's actually just put some fun back into us. Let's make training fun again. And in the run up to that, I had been like rattling around at the bottom of the team, like the bottom of the percentages. And it's like not a nice place to be, but also you get like nothing comes, like you get no luck basically down there either. Like, there's nothing works in your favor. And if things need changing further up the ladder, you're the one that ends up ultimately with the biggest effect.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was like a blessing in disguise was actually leaving and going away, enjoying training again, having some fun. And I didn't stress while I was out there that like I needed to do anything, because like I said, I just thought they just made a mistake and made the wrong decision. And went away, had fun, did some training, got in a consistent boat, did some training, and then went to trials like 3 months later. And we were in the top 5. So then we were invited back in. And the coach came up to me afterwards and was like, oh, like, what did you do? Like, what did you change? Like, you went from being this position to being in this position. And I was like, honestly, nothing. I was like, one, I genuinely thought you made a mistake. So I went away, continued training, got my head down. I was like, and I've actually really enjoyed training and had some fun. And the two of us continued that. And we were questioned a few times, like, hang on, we're not sure you're taking this seriously enough. Like, you're quite loud, you're quite chatty. And it's like, look, if the results aren't like, like, just look at the results that are there. Like, we're quicker than we were. Like, you've got to let us have this fun. And if we start going slowly and we start underperforming, fine, call us up on it. Mm-hmm. But don't call us up on it while we're actually thriving and doing the best that we have been doing. And like, I'm a very blue person with personality. Like, I'm very logical, I'm very numbers driven, and like, if I was to see someone else having fun and having a good time, my initial instinct would be like, well, they don't really care about this, but they're not taking this seriously. And so that part of it was hard for me to do, because for ages I'd just been like, well, like, they don't care about this. Like, they're laughing, they're having a joke. Like, this isn't a laughing or joking matter. We're trying to go to the Olympics sort of attitude. Mm-hmm. And actually, it was only myself that I was like causing issues for. Like, they were having a great time. And yeah, I think once someone almost forced me to have fun, and they say forced fun is the best kind of fun. But like, once I just started to relax, and then I think then it was just like slowly like, right. And for me, it was like, okay, but the numbers are still good. So I've got the confidence that like, this is actually the right thing to be doing, or this isn't being detrimental. So it's like, I think that change and being more relaxed about it, and even like now, and I think things like aren't going as well, it's like looking back and actually seeing like when I was at my best, like what was the environment like when I was thriving and I was getting the numbers that I wanted, and really looking at that and seeing what it was, but looking at like the bigger picture as well, like not just looking about like the small things, like was I going and seeing friends, like was I doing this at the weekends, like what was I doing with my evenings. And that's all made like a big difference when I started to actually look at myself as an athlete, but as a human as well. Like, what's my human life like? Because the two aren't separate and shouldn't be separate. But I did for a lot of years just like split the athlete is at training, the human, and they're not crossing over, they're not being linked, and that just wasn't the right thing to do. But you have to make mistakes to find that out, really.
It's really weird because I can relate to that so much, but I love what you said at the beginning of that, when you said that when you know, obviously everyone sees you as an athlete, but when you see yourself as an athlete, and obviously knowing that when you see yourself as an athlete, you expect yourself to give 110%, and then you expect yourself to have perfect nutrition, and then you expect yourself to do, and you do all these things, and you like you trap yourself in this box. And in that box, like you said, is that rule book that says, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do that, and you can't have fun. And when you break it up and realize that, yes, that's great and stuff like that, but there isn't a rule book to be an athlete. There isn't a rule book to do any of that. We don't have that with being a human. You can be whoever you want to be, because that's what's amazing about it. And as an athlete, we've especially at the moment, if you think about like I said, these guys, like, you know, even the culture that has been created around it, everything has to be perfect. You have to outwork everyone and blah blah blah. And it's this all or nothing kind of mindset, and it's great, and I've believed in it for so long and everything. But is it at the same time causing so much problems and so much pressure that we forget that we're still human, and we're still perceiving and, like, you know, taking part in a human experience. Like, this is what we're doing. And like you said, incorporating fun, relaxing into it, that's how you enjoy what you do. And it's very interesting. And like you said, we get in our own way with all this, and the cultures get in our way, and the belief systems get in our way. And if you look at it realistically and normally, we're just doing our job. And if you don't enjoy it, then how are you going to ever want to do more at it, want to get better at it, and, you know, let things fall into place?
Yeah. And I think it was also from watching the Olympics, and like Tom Daley, when he won his gold medal, and he was like, I'm the happiest I've ever been. Like, I'm in the best place. Like, my life is in the best place. And then he went and performed the way he did. And like the other sports, like the BMXing and the skateboarding, like they just competed with so much personality and so much freedom. And I was like really envious, actually, of like watching them do that. And especially like Sky Brown with her in the skateboarding, when she was like 2 runs where she failed, and she still just in that final run, just the confidence at like 13 or 13 years old, however she is, to try again with like just that, like going out. And like there must have been like people were so excited about her competing, and just like there was so much media coverage, and to have failed it twice, but to still have that freedom and like I don't, like, you know what, it doesn't care, and like the naivety. And it was just to go out and, you know what, let's just try this again for the 3rd time. I might stack it again like I have the previous 2. Like Sod's Law would say that I'm actually not going to land this. But, and like when she afterwards, and she said that she spoke to her coach and her dad, and they were like, look, we believe in you, you can go out and do this. Like, I was honest, like I think jealousy is honestly like the word to describe it, because I'm like, imagine being able to compete on the biggest stage with that much freedom and just that much confidence and self-belief. And yeah, it was just like, and that's where the medals were won. And that's what it looks like looking at the Olympics. Like those athletes that did have the best time and did go out there and show themselves and show their personality, and they're the ones everyone warmed to, and they're the ones that came home with the medals.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot to learn from it.
There's something in it that says to me, it's like the freedom in which you carry out your sport and you participate at is almost, more important than that do or die discipline kind of attitude and culture that exists. And so it's really, I don't think the two are, we don't see enough of it in that freedom and that lightness and enjoyment. And it's not broken down, I guess, enough into sport, I think. Whilst obviously, as you know, it's do. That's all it is. And the two don't really, obviously, you don't see enough of the meshing in that, which is quite interesting. Because if, people are free and they mess about and they don't do it, especially in football, if you're considered, you're just trying things and whatever, people are like, what are you doing? Like, you just get completely, berated for it. So it's very, it's, but then at the same time, the ones that do that, whether they're great or not, they're the ones that end up doing something that no one's ever done before. So it's a very interesting kind of relationship in that freedom versus that discipline and that one lane that we think we're in, but we're not actually in. So it's very interesting. How was your, I guess, obviously you've had injuries, and how has your perception of yourself, your identity and your mental health, developed alongside those injuries, and how's that been for you?
I think in a weird way, I'm fortunate with the number of injuries that I've had, that the first big injury I had, I probably didn't deal with it that well and hated seeing everyone else doing what I was doing, hated being indoors, felt very alone with it, only really spent time with the physios and the doctors, and really distanced myself and didn't really speak to anyone about it, because you don't whinge because you're an athlete. And I think
one of the parts of the rule book.
Yeah, we're all superhuman. There's nothing wrong with this. So I think I kind of took that mentality with the first one, and then slowly was actually, I think a couple of others got injured at the same time as me, who were in different squads. And so I ended up spending a lot of time with people that I didn't usually spend time with. And it was quite nice to chat to them. And then once I started being less of a loner in it and actually including more people into my injury, and they were also going through the same things because they were also injured. And so I learned a lot from it. And then the second time round when I got injured, I was very quick to be aware of what I was like the previous time, and was okay, so this isn't going to happen again. And there was a big group of us injured the second time. And so I made a WhatsApp group for just all of the injured athletes. Wow. And I can't remember what we were called, something probably not politically correct, and added everyone to it. And it was they can leave if they want to, but it was more, you don't have a choice to join, but you can leave if you want to leave. And I purposely did it like that, because there was men's, there were women's lightweight, there was I think there was someone from every discipline in the team, and knew that obviously pride would get over some people and they'd be I don't want to be part of this WhatsApp group, I'm not going to be injured for very long. And so I added everyone, and we honestly had the best time. And we'd meet up, we'd go for coffee, we'd organise so we could train together, and it made such a difference. And people were so open with how they were feeling, because we were all in exactly the same boat. we all knew exactly how the other person was feeling. Some days, some of us would be dealing with it really well. Other days, some people weren't. And there was like always someone there to chat to if you needed to. And we've like, even now we still chat on this group, even though it was like 3 years ago that we were all injured. And like, some people even just like passing advice on to each other, like some who'd had like similar injuries in the past, or it just made such a difference. And we'd like meet up for lunch, we'd go for coffee, we'd go if like 2 people had a swimming session, they'd go swimming together. And it was like we just found it really helpful. So I actually wrote a blog about it a couple of years ago, and I basically wrote about how it was to feel injured, and that it was just very honest. And I did say that it feels very lonely, and that you don't feel like the coaches, you can't offer anything to the coaches, so you don't get their attention, and you do feel like you've been disregarded. And I think openly saying these things, like the response I got to it was mad. And I think now it's up to like 3,000 people have read it or something. Like
amazing.
it was like, I didn't publicize it anywhere, but a couple of the coaches did get a hold of it and actually asked me to take it down. But I refused to, because I felt like if they had a problem with it, they shouldn't have the problem with the blog. They should have a problem with what they're doing. And they obviously feel like there's obviously some feeling of guilt or something. And nothing was ever, there was nothing, I never pointed the finger at anyone. It was all very much my feelings. And I was like, well, you can't tell me how I should be feeling. Like, this is how I feel. This is how I've been made to feel. And the best response I got from it was a guy from a county council, I think, messaged me and was like, I've seen your blog. I want to set it up for young carers in the area, so they all have a way of communicating, because they're all going through a similar thing. And that was like, I was like, right, there's absolutely no way I'm taking this thing down now. Like, that's helped more than the one person that I wanted it to help.
Incredible. And
I think, just being honest with it and being open about it. And like with this back injury that I had, obviously COVID added a whole different element to it. And we were very strict with like training bubbles, and that really isolated the rehabbers further, because we couldn't have like a rehab group, because that was too many people. That was people from different squads mixing, which wasn't allowed. And it was a lot easier to put the rehabbers, either can you train at home, or we had an office that they converted for us, and it was legitimately an office with like office chairs, filing cabinets.
What?
And I spent from 7:30 in the morning till 5:00 in the evening in this office doing my 3 training sessions, and I didn't see anybody. And I got to the end of the day and I was like, no. I was like, this is not, I was like, I can do this for a day, but there's absolutely no way I can do this for any longer. So I think from having like the confidence in knowing what an injury can do to you, and actually turned around and said that this isn't on, like, I'll find somewhere to train, but I'm going to train with other people, like train at a venue where there are other people, so I can at least have my breakfast and I can have my lunch with others. I was like, because that's like, I haven't seen anyone today, and I've been here for like 10 hours, and it definitely, but I wouldn't have had that confidence with my first injury. So yeah, it's saying that it's a blessing being injured that many times. The injuries aren't a blessing being injured that many times, but being able to know how I am going to be during the injury and the best things to set up for me has been like huge. And this whole back injury has like not been that bad at all. Like mentally, I've been actually probably the best through all of the injuries I've had, and it's probably been the biggest. It's had the biggest consequences of missing out on the Olympics, but actually, yeah, it's been fine, and yeah, still get injured though.
That WhatsApp group is incredible. I think it's brilliant, and like you said, from personal experience, from people I know within sport, is that it becomes this almost like you become isolated in itself, and then you almost go even further inwards into yourself, and you kind of like, I can't be helped, or I can't do this, and it like you kind of again get in your own way even more, and it's this weird. It's a weird thing because it's not what you want to do. You want to have people connect, and you want to have that community, and you want to reach out, but you kind of like, again, it's the thing with mental health, is you go in even more inside yourself the second you are in that isolation, and it just grows the distance grows from you to others. So creating that community and that social aspect, and knowing how important that is for you and pretty much most people I know in those situations, I think it's brilliant. And that growth you've had from it, turning injury into something turning that situation into something that is manageable, and then you can even get positives out. If not only is it incredible to see how like far you've come, like you said, from your first one, but in general as a role model, as an example, people hearing this or whatever, to know that you can do that. And those injuries, they're not great, but there are lessons in there each and every single time as a person, and for when that situation comes about again. Like, it's incredible. I think I love it. It's brilliant. How in those times when it's been really difficult, I've from little research here and there, it's those kind of, those times like that, how when those mental health things are really low, and like you said, whether it could be performance based or injury based, or kind of, quite isolated and loneliness, how have you dealt with that as a person? And yeah.
I think it's supporting yourself, surrounding yourself with a support group that's big and really diverse, because I think it's quite easy to have like a couple of close people, but they can't always be the best people to speak to. And I find at times, like, obviously family is like the immediate go-to, but actually they can sometimes ask really the wrong questions. And I've been really honest with my parents at times and gone, you know what, there will be times when I won't speak to you about, like, there's stuff that actually you can't help me with. And it's not that I don't want to, like, it's not that I'm hiding anything from them. It's just I know that I can get better help for elsewhere. And they're really, really good at just being like, as long as you know that you can always ask for help if you need it, we won't feel as though we're being left out, or you can't come and ask us. And it's like, because you just never know, it can be like the most random person that you've probably never even met can say something that can make a huge difference. And just like, not, also for me, it's like not being afraid to ask, to reach out to those people, even if you actually don't know them particularly well. If you have an inkling that actually they could help, 9 times out of 10 someone will always help you. They'll be willing, or if they can't, they will try and put you in the right direction. And I'm really close with one of the physios at training, and she's helped me massively with loads of different things. And I think if it's obviously with this team, and the person to go to would be the psychologist. But if you have a closer relationship with someone else, then use them if they're willing to be there to help you. And like there's a couple of people who aren't in the team anymore who have gone through injury, and I'll message them out of the blue sometimes to be like, what did you do when you felt like this? Or like, but because I was like, they've been through it, like they can actually give me their experience, and that's going to be way more helpful than my mum guessing and trying to help me. And they've been really good, really helpful. Like even just like people not related to sport, and like friends that from uni that that aren't in rowing, that can give me an answer that's to life.
Very like human perspective.
Yeah, like please just give me an answer that's not with a rowing head on, because that's not what I need. And like, yeah, people really do want to help if they can. And like they've now got really good at actually approaching me, which is really helpful, because sometimes it is like, everyone knows it's really hard to ask for help, but actually if someone comes and prods you, then it's like, okay, right, yeah, you're right, I actually there actually is something. And like I'm so unbelievably lucky with the people that I've got that will ask me that. And just, there was at Christmas, and I'd obviously been having this back injury, and we couldn't really work out why it was flaring up. And it was like New Year's Day, and I'd obviously got it into my head that like 2020 was crap, but 2021 is going to be better. And I like woke up on New Year's Day, and it was the physio, and she just went, "But how are you?" And that was it. Just floods of tears, and I'm not a crier. And I think I spent the whole day crying. And it was like just what I needed, someone to do that. But like, fair play to them for actually asking the question and prodding and being persistent, because I probably would have bottled it up for a bit longer. Yeah, it's like, it is hard. It's hard, and it has taken like a long time to find those people. But I think because I'm really open about it all anyway, and like I've talked about it and I've written blogs, and I've really not got anything to hide. Like I don't see it as a weakness. And like, yes, my competitors might hear me say that I had this or the other, but that doesn't mean I don't want to beat them when I line up against them on like on a start line. Like that's all different. And I think that's the bit that makes you, ultimately will make me stronger, because of the support network that I've got around me. Is probably so much stronger than what they've got, because actually I've opened up and I've been honest about it, and people are willing to then in return ask the questions and make sure. And I think I've definitely learned this year the link between mental health and physical health. And I think for me personally, if I'm not quite mentally, it will actually show in something physical. Like there might be something like really not wrong at all physically with it, but something might hurt. And the number of times I've been to the physio and they've like scanned it and they've done this and the other, and they're like, "Sam, we can't find anything." And I've always been like, "Well, what is it? What is it?" And actually now I'm like, was there actually anything, or was it just some low-lying anxiety? Was it something that I was stressing about? And because I wasn't addressing it, my body turned it into something physical. So I actually have to do something about it and not ignore it. Yeah, it's like, it's mad. I think, yeah, just how powerful your brain is, and actually utilizing how powerful your brain is. And I think that's what I've definitely been still learning a lot about.
Yeah, no, it's like that. I can't remember how the saying goes, but it's like the longer you bottle up, the higher your shoulders go. And I know I keep all my stress like right up in my traps and everything. And like, if that's the smallest indication of, some stress or whatever, imagine how much it's affecting it in every moment, every decision, every bit of pressure, every bit of guilt. It locks you up. And we joke about, or we don't joke about it, we explain it in kind of metaphors and boxes and stuff like that, or suffocating I used earlier. Imagine what that's doing then to your body. and
Yeah.
the two go so hand in hand. But I think as you mentioned, your openness that sounds like so important. How much do you kind of value the honesty and talking honestly about stuff and yourself and situations?
I think I've always been a really honest person, and that can get you into trouble, and people might not like it, but I would never. And I think me and my sister have this conversation all the time, and my mum's always like, "Oh, I wish I could be as honest." Because like, if my friend was to ask me something, and it's like classic, like, "Oh, does this look good?" And well, I'm going to tell you if it doesn't look good, because like, I don't like, why would you want someone to go out and I'd want them to do the same to me? And I think we've always had that honesty, and like, I don't think I have anything to hide. And I think it's not easy to be honest and open about those sorts of things, but I think as soon as I think I'm very lucky that I'm growing up in an era where we are talking about it more, and there is a lot of focus on breaking the stigma down. And like every day, I mean, it was World Mental Health Day yesterday, and the number of posts that you see on social media and people saying things, and people that you still think are superhuman say something, and it's like it is in everyone. And if you've got, I feel like if I'm happy to talk about it, then I should talk about it, because it will help someone, even if it's just one person who can hear it. It will help someone, because not everyone will talk about it, and people shouldn't be forced into talking about it if they don't want to. But if you're happy to do it and you don't have a problem with it, then it will help someone somewhere. And I think it was like Lando Norris from the Formula One said something on Good Morning Britain the other day, and he's talked about it. And it's like it's everywhere. It's in every sport, it's in every job, it's in every level of every job. And no one person's mental health is any less significant than someone else's. And especially now in a world of social media and all of that sort of stuff, like, I just think it's like we should just, if you can, talk about it, because there will be someone somewhere that will hear it. And there was, I think one of my favorite responses I got was, I did a podcast on my needle phobia, which is a whole nother subject, which definitely we don't need to cover. But it was, I think my dad listened to it, and he sent me a message and was like, I mean, he's like one of the closest people to me. And he was like, even he didn't really realize the extent of it. And he was like, that really made me think about things. And my godfather also got in touch and was like, this is huge. Like, this has really made me think about this. And it was like, these are two like big rugby playing guys that I've looked up to for years, thinking that they're like heroes. And if they can listen to it and they can see something and think, even if you just think about something differently, like, it might not change anything. You might not, I'm not saying that everyone needs to run to therapy and get things fixed, but if you can just start thinking about the tiniest thing differently, then it just starts the ball rolling, and it will be in their back of their minds, I hope. And I think it's an important subject, and one that I'm passionate about for the generations coming up.
Yeah, well, look at even, I don't know, Tyson Fury, obviously won on the other night on World Mental Health Day, and boxing is the most alpha male, physical sport you can get. And in the press conference, which is normally about insulting every single insecurity you can about the other guy and, getting down to rock bottom, he was being asked questions about mental health and happily talking about it in that moment. I was like, this is just incredible for the guys, the top of elite sport in one of the most aggressive alpha situations you can possibly get. And he's obviously been so open about his mental health journey. It's incredible, and it's great to see where that's going. It is also incredible to see, and just that one word of that perspective you had, in that you're seeing every little situation, and you talk about mental health through everything that you've spoken about in the last hour or so. It's your perspective on even just being grateful for the situations that have gone against you, or would say that they've gone against you, or mental health in general and everything. It's very inspiring to see that perspective, and that kind of comes first, and then having the compassion and having the passion to help others and to give to others, whether it be a blog or a podcast. So I think your perspective on everything is very inspiring, because that kind of starts it all off from what you talk about. So I think that's pretty incredible.
Oh, thank you.
We finish every podcast with the question, what makes you human, innately human, and what makes you not just a rower?
I think probably pretty much what you've just said. I think my perspective on how important you only get one life, and how important it is to make sure that you are happy in that one life.
Mm-hmm.
I think, is how I would sum it up. I think define happiness. I think happiness is when I think if you have, I want to say no regrets. I think if you can get to the end and you've got no regrets and you're content, and there is no, within yourself, there's none of those feelings of like jealousy or greed, or you're just content with what you've got, and you enjoy waking up every day and you look forward to going to bed and waking up the following day, then that's happiness.
Yeah, it's that acceptance of who you were in the moments that you've had and who you are now. And that's obviously, like, we go back to in your perspective. So that's pretty special. I like that definition. It's a good one. I like it.
That was really on the spot, that one.
Well, if you used it in the last question, I had to break it down further.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming on and telling your story and speaking so openly about everything. Like I said, sharing that perspective of yours, which I think is brilliant. And yeah, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me.